Irangsigi part ama oirabane report se. It's not outside of it. Nahange koini inariba mayam sina. Riot ama thokraba matungda investigation happened. Tisan kosan nan tawraga kamai tawna thokriba no hairaga report ama iraga pirakpana te. Sigi report iriba sabsa akoigi thoiba crisis sigi part ama oirabane. They may not think about protesting students who are blocking the traffic. Police beating them up, and you said protesting students beaten up by the police. Now, in the same sequence, you see one ambulance got stuck there and one is struggling on life and death within that one. If you include that picture, then you will begin to sense an insensitivity at the problem of that protest. In that film, you don't incorporate every picture. Reality is captured through that frame. First of all, thank you, Manipur University Student Union and Research Scholar Association of the University, and Ozaimu Chowi for chairing the session. You must have seen in the last few days there has been commotion in our state, different kind of responses to this report by PUCL. And you may take this as a part of that response to this report. For today, I have picked up, this is my response, a little detailed. You must have also sensed that I have written a letter to the PUCL, and they have also responded yesterday, and I'll be replying back today. And this is the first of a series of lectures that I intend to do across the country regarding the PUCL report. The purpose of today's address may differ a little bit from what I intend to do in metropolitan cities, including Delhi. So today, as I'm addressing my own people here, I'll be speaking part of my speech in Manipuri. And those who are watching, I know many people are eager to see, especially these controversies that have happened on this report. Especially, I must begin by saying that I thank PUCL for replying to my letter, and I am ready to accept. I intend to invite them, not only here in Manipur, but also in other places, next time when I have this kind of a public engagement. Because whatever is written is in the public domain, and it must also be responded publicly, not through private communication. So what I intend to do today is, if PUCL report is a text, then we need to set up a context to understand it. I often give this example, the relationship between, if you try to understand, this is something that I often give. If you want to understand Kathakali dance and the movement of the eye as the text of performance, that is something that you are interested to decipher, then you need the face of the performer, you need the mask, you need the costume of the performer, and the characters. All of them are required to comprehend the expression in the eye. If you remove these contexts, the costumes, the face, the mask, and if you leave only the eye, you will not be able to understand fully what that expression in that eye means. So that is the relationship between text and context. The text is something that we are trying to understand, and the context is required to comprehend that text. So first of all, you need to understand, as Ozoimoso has already flagged up, PUCL is a very respected organization and very influential organizations, and they have been defending human rights, including questions on Manipur's experience vis-a-vis with APSPA and so on. Many of the members, I know them personally, and that is one of the reasons why I feel all the more disturbed. If it is anybody else who have written such kind of a report, I would not have bothered to respond. It's like the trolls on my social media. I don't normally respond to them. It's not important. But what I've decided to respond is for two reasons. Because this organization matters in our public discourses as a part of civil society. As you know, that the chairman of this jury is a former judge of the highest court in this country, the Supreme Court. And two other members were high court judges. They're renowned professors who have worked for decades on various areas in social sciences. And despite this composition in their earlier works, I kept on wondering when I see this. There are certain things that I was expecting it, and I was also hoping that they would take a much more reflexive approach while dealing with these issues. Because it is not an event that had finished. It's not like a riot which has been over, that is a crisis has been over. People have settled down, and it is a post hoc commentary on the event. This is an ongoing part. So in that case, this report has responded to it. Be that Kuki politician, Kuki civil society organization, Kuki civilians, or the Meitei civilians, or the Meitei CSOs and the Meitei politicians. That must tell them that they are not someone sitting in Delhi, Mumbai, or Hyderabad, or in JNU campus, or Delhi University campus, or in IIC, or in Habitat Center in Delhi's. They are a part of this problem now. And they have to be aware of the fact that what they do is bound to have an effect in the entire process, including of what they are presuming to be a peace process. And one of the important dimensions in which they get implicated in this crisis is a component part of this crisis, which is the disinformation and the information, the effort to have a narrative control on what, why, how, and wherefore of this problem. They are commenting on that, whether they admit themselves or not. Maitailon the Hargako. Irangsigi part ama oirabane report. It's not outside of it. Nahange koini inariba mayam sina. Riot ama thokraba matungda. Investigation happened. Tizan kosan nan tawraga kamai tawna thokriba no hairaga report ama iraga pirakpanate. Sigi report iriba self say akoigi thoiba crisis sigi part ama oirabane. They may not be cookies or they may not be Maitais. They may be a Bihari, they may be a Maharashtrian, they may be a Tamil or anybody, but they are part of the problem now. Sigi problem si kamai oira ino hairagadi. Thoi ba Irangsigi yamna important of a component ama yauri si kaino the information war ne. Narrative ama kanna tawre ba hek hauba dagine. Irangsig kanana kamai na tawdana karamba kanda kamai na thole ino haibagi contestation ama laabane, which have allowed the conflict to linger on. Highly but narrative control to one of one of Iran's command to Reno Hinamasigi, Lean of Honor Bagi Maraks, the Mush Yaksal Avenue. They've also jumped into the bandwagon of this narrative war. Maduna Neba Queen first thing, they are ethically implicated in our crisis. What they speak, if the hatred continues, they will be responsible. If they are able to craft the peace process, they will also be impossible. Not as an outsider or a mediator, but part of the problem. That's what the first thing that PUCL must understand what they are doing right now. And I've said, my complication, Sigi, examples again. What is the proof of this? Is the way in which the cookies and Maitais have responded differentially to their report. They must reflect on this. Why Maitais and cookies have responded to their report differently. That is the narrative war that has been going from day one. That's the first thing that drags me, that this report cannot be just dismissed like any other organization doing things on Manipur. Sigi matang sida. Second important part, akoina yengba matamda. A text is produced. I say, I'm speaking in English because some of them may be hearing this because it is live stream. Otherwise, my earlier plan is to speak to you in our mother tongue. So I'll be mixing these two in between. I'll be writing a letter, as I've said it today, because some of their reply smacks of what I consider an arrogance that thinks that others is saying something, so we don't care. We will be just bullshitting. And I use this word called bullshitting not as expletives. There's a famous philosopher in Princeton University called Harry Frankfurt. He wrote a famous essay called On Bullshit. Liars and bullshitters are two different things. Amarom the yeng. Oy the bangang mamisidin truth si respect however. Aduna ne mamano oy the bangang is. Achumba sikari no isa. Oy the bangang missing sin respect however. Aduna ne mamano oy the bangang ida. These are liars. They respect truth. Bullshitters do not respect truth. Openly, they will say something, We are familiar with it. Many of this right-wing politicians and Modi government, they often bullshit. They don't lie. Because they can tell you straight, something we know it is false, they will still speak. This is a characteristic of this right-wing government that rules this country. Some of the Godi media is exactly doing that. So this is bullshitting. It is a feature of what people call it post-truth world, where truth doesn't matter, but perception is more important, emotional component of the message and how you feel. The manipulation of your emotion, your perception matters more than determining what is truth. This is what in social science we call it today as post-truth. Bullshitting is a peculiar aspect of this post-truth world. It is exactly why our conflict, the tragedy in our state, the crisis, is all the more serious because emotions management and perception is what people are doing it. And they will be packaging things in a way that we have. I'll be citing some of the examples and what had happened over the last 2 years. So, what second aspect that we need to understand is what I'm saying is, this is narrative war, but it is a part of a perception management, a characteristic marked by bullshitting and emotional arousals. They do that, and they use all techniques to do this, to produce certain kind of a desired effect. And I feel terribly sorry that the PUCL, despite eminent scholars within that, they have committed a big blunder, according to me, and I have given an example, a hint to them. And surprisingly, they have the audacity to tell me to go through the entire report, despite having reminded them that I don't have the time to go into the specifics of the report in the letter. And I'll be telling you as well as them that why I choose a particular component of that one. It is part of a research methodological strategy while you are responding and analyzing a text. And I have reminded them for a detailed engagement of public deliberation, which they have accepted, thankfully, and I welcome that, and I'm ready to do that, and which I have already told you. This is not the first occasion I'll be doing it. I'll be following this up in other places. Now, why did I say about their response? For example, I'll give you to begin with, and rest a little complicated pictures will be discussed. In their response, they said that we have published photographs of the Meitei victims as well as Kuki victims. And I would be honestly asking them, maybe I must have missed those photographs. If you have any picture of a Meitei victim in that report, please tell me the page number, of that picture. And I'm repeating it here in a public gathering, not in a private conversation, which is on air, this is recorded. To the best of my knowledge, and I have checked it again, and I would like to tell them, when you responded to me that you published photographs of both the Meiteis and Kuki victims, probably I must have missed it. If it is so, please show it publicly, which page number, and what is that photograph that you have shown of the Meitei victims. So the issue that I was raising is not about Meitei victim or Kuki victim though. Picture, there is a slightly different arguments that I was doing, which disturbs me all the more why they did it. I'll be coming back to it. So such kind of thing, to say that, when I say that there are 17 in numbers, you have shown the dead bodies, the victims of Kukis in the entire report, and not a single one. And I said, thankfully, I thank you for not showing the dead bodies of Meiteis. I'll get back to you why I said that. So we need to know that this, in narrative control, this time we have lot of bullshitting and perception management has been done. And I don't know whether you have this video, is it connected? I have given the organizers video clippings. I'll tell you one more thing here. So take, for example, in the afternoon of 3rd of May, you see images of people when the violence happened in Torbung areas with sophisticated assault rifles. And those images, and then houses being burned down, and people running away here and there, those images were flashed on social media. And I know, even though I was in Delhi, I said, what the heck? This is not a normal violence of community fighting with sticks and bamboos and slingshots and so on. There are sophisticated assault rifles. That image was used as showing that Meitei's armed men disrupting peaceful tribal rally on social media, the then Twitter, including under a particular name of a well-known writer, activist. Such kind of manipulation was there from the day one. What is the consequence of that image? Is that people in Imphal particularly, that violence with the gun, what was the psychology think of that day? Those of you, especially Meiteis in Imphal. Or if you're a different community, think your community houses have been burned down there with sophisticated arms and mobs running amok there and hitting here, burning things, women and children running around, running away from those violence. Or men saying, "No, Meitei Masanatra, come, you come, if you're a Meitei blood, come and defend." There are so many of them. You have seen those images. That create a particular emotional thing here in Imphal. And I said, one of the first things that the government should have done, I have said this on my first interview, which was telecasted on the national level, was on 21st of May, not even a month after the crisis. In an interview that I gave to the print, I told them the government should have cracked down and made the necessary arrangement, because you should know that those images are bound to have a retaliatory violence against the other community. We were going like this. At least I was going like that. This report has nothing to speak about this. For them, it is a clear-cut violence started in Imphal and its adjoining areas, and Kuki houses were burned down. And there is retaliatory violence against the Meiteis in Churachandpur. So you realize that this report, as I said, is part of that information war, whether you like it or not. So this is Some of the examples, I'll go specifically to the other component of how to engage with these text. And I have already said these two important things, because you are not commenting on something outside of the crisis. Whatever you speak should also be very careful, very cautious when you respond to these texts. Because if you want peace and normalcy to return and justice to prevail in our state, then your response to this particular report by PUCL, you should have a very measured way of, however as provocative this report is to you. But you should call it out in a measured fashion. And fear no. You should call a spade a spade. How should we analyze this text? There are certain ways which I follow normally as a student of social science when I analyze a text. As I said, text and context. And some of the ways to understand is what we often call discursive analysis, critical discourse analysis. There's another method we often use called frame theory. And each of these methods you use, and then you will realize one specific pattern in this report. They said that this report is based on deputation and testimonies and so on. And how they use it, the words they use, what kind of impression they create, the order in which the events are organized, the chapters are organized. There are issues with that, and that is where I have commented and given them. I'll be sharing with you some of those critical aspects and to make you understand why this report is problematic. Before that, we also need to know that whatever is written in this text, you can't just brush it aside. There are recommendations given on relief games and rehabilitations. I welcome their recommendation for an SIT, but I was asking for more than that. For me, I have asked for a JPC, Joint Parliamentary Committee, to investigate. That will show the seriousness of the government of India towards the crisis. Because the executive's actions should be held accountable to the legislature. They should be subjected to legislative oversight function. A JPC, I'm happy to inform you, including our leader, former CM Ibobi, had written on these issues to constitute JPC. So we welcome SIT, even that is okay. Because accountability must be fixed, including for writing such reports. It must be held responsible. But as a civil society group, I said that some people feel offended when I say, I'm not going for an FIR. What is important is to call them out and engage. And since you know that it is a narrative war, you are not responding to the PUCL's report only. You are responding to the narrative, the twisted narrative. You will lose track if you concentrate on this report only and without realizing that this is part of a larger narrative game plan or a narrative process. You will be losing track. So your ideas should be very clear. You need to call them out specifically where they go wrong. And I was expecting, and I still have, that the letter yesterday gave me a sense that the fortitude, the sincerity that I was expecting may not come forth now. Because the tone and tenor of the way they wrote the letter to me tells me that they were not ready to do things. They're already set up things to speak in a particular manner. So when you use, let me explain some of these issues called, what is frame theory? When you use, in analysis, when you frame something, the interpretation and the informations acquire certain specific meaning. A famous saying that I have reminded in one of my first, I think it's my first response to this report on my social media, when I said facts do not stand on their own. Some people don't understand, but many of you, that's why I said, especially our students, research scholars here, you need to know that facts do not stand on their own. It's a famous metaphor which says facts are like sacks. Bora gumbane. Bora se matunda lepangam dedana. The sacks don't stand on its own. When you put something like rice or something, then the sack will stand up. Bora se kariguma khara hapsal matunda lepangam bado adune. Facts there, they don't stand on their own. This example you will see, those of you from history, in E.H. Carr's famous book, What is History? So facts don't stand on their own. Perspective amala akanda never fact ki magi meaning ama acquired to raise. Only when the facts are put within a particular perspective, then it begins to speak. And E.H. Carr famously said that facts don't speak. We make them speak for us by putting those perspectives. The facts will speak for us. So take for example, Inglo Kuki war the Mai Tharame in itself. It's a fact, but what does it mean? Maitei na Tharame akoi du usitaba inter-community relationship ke tension namagi manungda hapsal kanda get the Mai Tharame habidugi one talk madugi meaning do full form the lakadoine. Mai Tharame habidu kakta di kaidore angang hena Tharamira soiramira. It acquires a very different meaning of tire burning in that gate. It is the narrative, this is the perspective which makes the speak differently. That's what historians were saying. That's what social scientists often say. That facts don't stand on their own. It is our perspective which makes them speak. So framing is like putting a perspective. And it produces certain kind of consequences in your knowing. Immediately you will begin to see women as broken face and very humorous reel. Mabung sinamagi masanupi mayumda lakpada masanupi se mabung na gift of the loge to the mabung sina my masanupi se mamit nama dark spot of kamaga uba. I was black. Somebody has punched her eyes. A mabung is solved in a bedroom. The Changchan Katano piece a yalevako. Man's housing and a magi Masenupa, the poor cinema, Tongzemana, Hanoka, the Masenupi Nupase, Bendies, Elgamheim, Po, Magalera Manunga. Framings, when you frame something as like any information, you will have a predisposition to interpret in a particular manner. That's the framing. Video Libra, Pravin Swamigi, video Riaubra. No ready to anyway, I could see Kang the Bagi port as over Malay, but no framing. When you frame something, then it is, say, trivial and non-trivial, minority and a majority, then entire information events will speak differently. You're predisposed to interpret your facts in a very different manner. The facts of the events will acquire different meanings. So trivial and non-trivial, majority, minority. This is a kind of a framing that you do, and it gives you a particular direction to interpret. Subconsciously or otherwise, you will begin to interpret something differently. That's framing. So when you respond to a text, you must see how this text is being framed, how it frames things. I'll give you a couple of examples from the report, and you will see the discomfort that many Maitais feel and why many cookies are happy with the report. And correspondingly, where, in that case, the writer and this text stand in that relationship. Do they stand on the Maitai side, or do they stand on the cookie side? If the text stands on the cookie side, why the Maitai will be happy with us? If it is on the Maitai side, how will cookie respond to that one? So the partisanship that I was talking of it, and by saying that they are part of the problem, it is inherent in the way the empirical fact is the response that you get it now. If it has taken within court a neutral positions and trying to put certain facts and figures up front, then you will have a very different things. Or even if you think in a particular contestation, you think one is wrong and one is right. In a conflict situation, how do you go about dealing with that? That's a huge responsibility. I am not saying that neutral doesn't mean that in reality there's somebody is being done wrong too. You can't be neutral in that sense. But if your investigation on an action turns out to be somebody has done something wrong, then obviously that report writing is bound to reflect some. So the assumption that they have is that somebody is wrong, and that is why this contestation is. And how that thing is being produced is not so much because of the investigation and its truth, but the manner in which this report frames things. That's why frame theory is very important for us to look at how this report is being framed. Second, if you look at critical discourse analysis, there are manner in which the report uses metaphors, rhetorical style, the syntactical structures, the use of word, the sentence, the paragraph formations, all of that will come. And you will see certain picture gets differently produced. So these are the two tools that you will see. The third aspect which comes from this school would be something like, how the writing style. This is how we often do it, and I'll be giving you now, once I finish this, the premise of my engagement with this text. And you will see how this report is being framed. And their choice of word, it reveals far more than what is written, and then people think that this is what is there on the literary text itself, but the manner in which these things have been organized and framed. For instance, there is a way of looking at news report or this kind of report. Inverse pyramid model, they say. The important things will be written in the earlier first phase when people are reading it, and unimportant things will be just pressed aside towards that. So it's an inverse pyramid. You will spend much more time highlighting this, positioning it up front, and you'll just dismiss it in the footnote or otherwise. And this report suffers from that, deliberately pushing something as a footnote, not using in the main text, and so on. The other one is the eagerness, the biases comes from when you use certain materials without even understanding what that material is. And you will be shocked to know this. I'm pretty sure that they may not even understand. Because there is a picture of a social media comment, and they describe it as anti-cookie, without realizing that that particular comment, we don't know who's it. After all, in social media, we don't know who's it. But from the content, when you read, that particular comment is saying that Maitai should stop taking cookies as poppy planters and drug dealers and or illegal immigrants. And I am saying this as a kongsai macha ama oina. As a kongsai cookie, I'm saying that do not do this kind of a communal taking of cookies as poppy planters and illegal immigrants. The comment says. And it goes on to say that, yes, I'm a cookie, but I'm ready for NRC. But Zabro Haima, are you ready to include Maitai Pangal and Maitai from Bangladesh when you do NRC? Doing of a challenge to the others and appealing them, don't act like a hero on social network by branding us illegal immigrants and such. Will these judges and professors and others, I wonder, how come they make such kind of a blunder? You have taught in universities for decades, supervising students. You do not even know how to check this, which is written in Manipuri. You should have taken help from someone to understand what is the content of that. Simply there is a word cookie there. You think that anything cookie, that is the anti-cookie. Because it was a response to, within quote, Maitai revivalist radical group. So anybody who responded, them must be anti-cookie. Without even bothering to check what is that comment, they publish in their report it as a comment that shows anti-cookie sentiments. That is the kind of blunder that people do. You're so obsessed with a particular way of saying things. So if you look, this is a very exhaustive paper. You might be threatened. 694 pages. And if you read the way a social science students like me will read, you will take more time. So what I do is I have a first reading first, second that I go on and I started deciphering. Third, I check with my research assistant again, is this right? Is this okay? Remember that part, what did they say there? So we have a brainstorming and discussions and you write it. It will be very threatening for us. And without realizing these, that's why I said, you need to know how to engage with these texts and why. I have begun this talk today with the why part of it. That is part of it. It is part of our narrative war. And they are either creating problems and how different people have responded would mean different kinds of things to them. Now look at this. One of the ways when you use these things, the different kinds of framing, I'll give you one example when they said the crux of this report, there is 4 parallel things they have talked about. Yes, it's in the first. That is, it is in page 105. It is the 4th chapter. Just, framing. Okay. No. Do you have that Praveen Swami's video? Play that one. I want to show not from this report how framing is done. Once I shared this on my social network once. Akoy missing the masibu uram gidre ne sumai to race boy na tagalorga isai now sa larik pa au larik tama matok tai haro kangbu no masidai sida sairak po akampe ngango to gi video ma demo ke India gi afau analysis ni strategic analysis afau ai gi framing se moina to se kamai to gi ngoba kai no ma hype without saying it somebody can say meaning se hide na kai no ma hype se framing na kamai produce to ge se ngoba is ready. It's not connected. Music if you the later, bro. I'm udresi da. World Cup talk later, no sir. Man, system to set up to get them. Framing. This is one example of how subtle way of picking up and organizing materials. Even ma'am se kamai na karam framing the organize or meaning se smai hide ga sudum chat pa yawa ki framing se kamai shape to gese. This is how when they write newspapers or articles you do that often. Yadrabo. Let me continue what I was saying. Events of violence, chapter number 4. One of the things that I must begin with this first. Nangi sigi magi chapter se. There's 12 chapters in this report. Asigi report chapters the magi matang setting the context chapter number 1 and Manipur states the demographic karigi port kamaina present we guys yaw whenever. So this is factually error which has a bearing. I'll give example once these things are ready. Are you ready? Same guy, bro. Bro. No, it can't hear.
Covering the grass with the ashes of centuries.
Yes. Asin ang microphone do ya, bro. Yeah, ina. Adu din ang kado wino ta do magi laptop ki thamam do thamu ya dro.
Covering the grass with the ashes of centuries of learning and literature. For hours, fragments of burning paper.
See, akoigi bus thabagi event am tawgedana bus selalanin tawgi do adu kandai da print ki kenoni adai da work tawni mase maming am tin chatpa strategic analysis the India gi mas influential am nu pane ba magi program ne magi se March in adaidani 2024 male in kanbara ar magi framing se kamai haroki em maboko ai maitai ron da hana hayoge sigi my sound se clear oider mane ma hain sineba sigi April sida Say Karagi Mamanga, Governor Gifasagraba Londo, Lampak Laida, Chi Chakbugi, my arm ties in it, Ufun or Laga Kogi Kariba, Kogi, Kaurising Kogi, Chi Chakwi Lemose, Kangoiga. Angoi my umpire, Governor Gilons in Motale, Karigino, the radical Maitai Kangu Krana, library Mai Tavadagi, Larik Ma Mangangare. See the same April Sida. Adu Matam the Mangi to the Larik ni, the same Maiduna. My Saki to the Larikatani Mangi, but Vujikanda April Sida Taurizazi, Miway boy in the city, in the Sigi Mai Jakpada. Aduna Matam to Sukamta Kaimtoki de Fagi de, which is Adum Lacy never. See the Haidaiba was the framing Zikamaita, the destruction, Mai Chakiba, traditional Mangiba, radical Maitai Kangudo. Now, second example is that even you don't say Maitai radical Haidasu, Ataba Miduna Kai Hairagada or Sigi, Sa is a radical Maitaina Tawani Haibasedum, implicit when Chakadon never takes. This is setting up, this is framing how you narrate. Yeah, I'm the innocuous Oiberman, but framing is in the Tagalu never. Akoigi press, I social media, the Pendana, Colom Nakarikana doino, Nanga Kadoino, Ira Kaikana doino, and the Kunagan Tauti has. I couldn't you working among a Mogdabaki mean and Ango to some Targa, Adugi opinion to the Yum Famware, can the policy matters influence of Salasa, Nangbangam, the Bangang Bahita, by Ebangam, the Bai, by Yaubangam, the Bangang Pampang, the Ba, Adumina marginalized or exclude or Gatambadagi, I couldn't Nangbangam Mogdaba never say feminist in the Suhaidana. I could give feminists in the Suhaiba one ever say. I could get the Loilam Gimakada Mina Suhaiba. I could say Katua Tamamina, colonizers in Duna, I could give Madame the Nangus in Saturday, but Kojakano, Koi problems, Zekainoina. I think it's one again the feminist nice you. No passing, I could give Madame the Nanga, no piece of the Sini Moina Palms, it's in the Duna, Dum Tau later, I could Nango later, Minamoy Duniam, the Dum Hingreb. I don't know Moina Kari anti-colonial movement, Natraga, anti-patriarchal movement, Lakanda. You speak. Otherwise, you will be spoken about. You write, otherwise, you will be written about. We have been written about by them and spoken about us by them. Whether it is within the parliament or it is outside of the parliament, public sphere space there is the space marginal into worldview later. Why one of the reasons why we need to respond to such kind of a report. Into Adagi, Kamai don't engage Togani to getting a sign in Hizareva, Kanano, Irabi missing the Kanakanano, Kamai respond Togani, Makwigi influence over the sectors in the name of Hizarit. Changasanga goes to Womatota. Nadungang Batai Nangibo was a Mokoin Nang with the Akoin name calling away. Madi Aduni, Madi Adane said, Ma Haiba, Miduna Nangibo, Wadu the native. That will survive because you are only attacking the person. And personalized of the vida, Muigi contained the narrative. That narrative is the target of the me, the name calling the Muidi Aduni, Madi Adani, Muyaduta Wesa. It doesn't get you far. What is important is to debunk what is written. The wrong ones. If they are good ones, we say this is good. If you have committed some wrong, we must tell them this is wrong. Adugi framing dugi akoigi events the kamina constant in national media sida tauna na lairaba framing mayam siga sigi reports isu is part of that one only. Tauduna da laba chahi ani the narrative word the framing tauduna in a peculiar way the uhan la ba mayam se hujik so dum chanthara ine baduna nenga size PUCL gi reports ka te koina respond to say it is to the narrative war. It is that narrative control to adugi battle to nekoina thengari size. Just see, this is a renowned person in the national media.
For hours, fragments of burning paper drizzled on the perfectly manicured lawns of the Raj Bhavan in Imphal, covering the grass with the ashes of centuries of learning and literature. 2 decades ago this April, activists of a Meitei radical group seeking to eradicate the Bengali script from their homeland with matches and buckets of kerosene set fire to the Manipur State Central Library. Estimates suggest some 145,000 books, some of them priceless manuscripts, were lost in the arson. No one was ever caught or punished. Libraries are a small, even trivial loss compared to the lives lost, the brutal violence, and the ethnic cleansing Manipur has faced since 2023. Yet, the burning of the library offers an opportunity to reflect on the forces that engendered the ethnic warfare and consider how they might be engaged and finally still.
Pan gibra second example the handa kitwe ba mi si da kanana tawuno si pan gibra. It doesn't mention, but comparisons it draw tawre. Amadu sul mai thagi mangi edu kanam tu su phagi di edu wa adu mai tawduna handa kisidi lari khar mangi ba gidu ke am thina khene sidi mi si ba yaw rai ne aduna thoi ibe irang sa mase kamai tawduna investigate tawgani karmai tawna lefan gani mans kamai chathar inu haiba forces singa cha naina ge haita raga di akoi masi mathau tai hen haira ine. But nangi framing is the already ngasai radical mai taina thai ja koina two events haija ba yodina amana pusin jagra di loira ne ba. Sumaina implicit manner the wahi kuzin season of a mawong, the way you organize your text, the manner in which words have been used, informations are being shared. Sigi pot mayam se. Akoigi sigi text se pa the madu haibam change benangna line by line, facts by facts kind of do. Because once you understand and the facts don't stand on their own, it's a peculiar way of organizing that, it's a peculiar way of presenting them, your choice of word, the manner in which the text is organized, all of them. You need to understand when you respond. Okay, you know the muine ya muktana ga hakaneba. Tell us factually incorrect ones ka hakaneba. It's a trap. Not every factually incorrect ones doesn't matter, but there are some incorrect ones which have repercussions. But far more important is facts the habsan griba magi narrative style of the neighbor. Say for example in this report, factually wrong, they said there are 36 scheduled tribe communities in Manipur. One might ridicule that, oh, you are doing a work on Manipur, even you don't know how many scheduled tribes are there in Manipur. You don't know, you said that there are 36 of them. Actually there is 34. You might use in a rhetorical style by saying that you don't even know how many scheduled tribe communities are here. But that is not as a profound thing as the other mistakes that they make. The blunder that I have given you one example of social media report. And you need to know mine organize or is chapters detailed chatli bako matang 12 chapters. Luerak padamana epilogue am suhapi ba. Mamang the executive summary and the chapakanda marak the main content body is chat level. So hujik aina uning ay hogi sigi framing sida nasagi 4 parallel ke nota udong to ulo. This is in page number 105. Set up to ini ngasa events sing kamainan narrator ke do yeng bio. Video the last of no hana set up to sida moino say tracing the events however you are trying to trace the event hai Irangsigi kanta haura haibasa again perspective change say when you trace back the events the second war was a kamai haura ena nang thiruba matamda Treaty of Versailles de haudoribra Hitler coming to power de hogdori banatraga police ki the border da German gi kainoma mogi platoon la section gumama outpost some of the sea giba spark to the day logdori bra or Japan war maniputa matam da will it count it when the field commander Bama sector the landa se koi move in to sena Japan military headquarters the ibudu the war sha hawen log do ribra tozo on a low iba decision no metu the log do ribra natraga nasagi mogi actual troop movement torga river lamaga chatpagi tragedy madu the mogi food supply la ko kopam am missing the tau thagi bu turen ngang but the first tragedy struck out of Japan war mo ni sanga kumatam da ade hog do ribra natraga the first fire exchange of fire in the war sha hog do ribra how do you write when you trace back an event? There is always a choice involved with your researchers. Depending on your theoretical perspective and your purpose, you will be choosing it. That is why modern social science tells us that Nangi researcher is independent and observer ki dichotomy se mawa log de. Every truth is historically and culturally situated. Every researcher must have a reflexivity to reflect on their assumption, their bias, their background, their ideological orientations. Or even in social science literature, Michel Foucault, you ask question A, not question B, is determined by an episteme. Nangi framework ama yawuna neba nang hangibo question itself to framework ama na knowledge ki framework amna guide tawra hangai ne, but that you ask question A, not question B, adu determine tawa already knowledge system ama leiraga na neba hangai. Adu masigi epistem se karino, aigi assumption se karino, say han reflect ogadam reflect research togedi. I must be aware of my biases, my assumptions, and the reasons why I am choosing this topic to do research, why I am asking a particular question. You should have that clarity, and that's broadly what is the concept called reflexivity. Adu lehura dedi sigi blunder si tawroi hain. I sumoi da ha me even. My first response, I reminded them, if you have done that, you will not do this. Now, magi framing how pasida events ki say, I'll give you an example. Magi says that there are 4 antecedent to the violence. Ma immediate context ka piri ba mana. So one day yung be over. Eviction and forceful demolition of tribal village followed by protests organized by ITLF. Second, maris na frame toroga sato investigation. Maris na mana kamay na karam choose the way. Agitations and protests and advocacy by Meiteis demanding inclusion of Meiteis and Meitei Bangals in the ST list. Third, protests against the violation of the reservation norms in the recruitment at Reims. Sigi national policy reservation, the director Santa Oiring again when he was the director, there was a negotiation with the striking students. Mayam sigi adugi mayauriba precedents in violence again. Case Sonzang village to Ginimana said eviction and forceful demolition. And fourth, in the protest meetings and advocacy by tribal groups opposing the Meiteis, Meitei tribal demand to Tawa Marido. Asida Tauraga Salia the mana main oinat Haris Sigi Hariba Ahum Marise, Masida common threat in the singis Nangasagi, Estigi Posina, common oinamu frame amani haine. Ahum zitongan tuang kanabada masi kogi karihaine connecting them masi get threats in connect orisida asagi SDG issues in high. This is called frame. This is how you try to organize the sequence of events. Second, magi kainose. Eviction ki se. Eviction ki matang si maung yeda. Case Sonzang village ki agitation manga sai first pali basigi narrative sa hawrakan manung sisumuk frame among thanga ga yeng ne independent of that frame yeng mana kari haisida reports in page 107 kari mu igeda. This incident must be understood in the context of the allegation that there is increasing illegal migration from Burma and Bangladesh into Manipur. The demand for strong administrative action against illegal immigrants was made mainly by the valley-based groups, and a number of Naga groups joined them in the demand for implementation of NRC. Hairiba poche, masi sina sigi context the yenga dabne sineba. Eviction gi poche. Sonzang village gi eviction gi wari se. Accusation of illegal immigrant ni aduni haibagi pot NRC gi sigi debate se. Masigi context the tauraga yenga dabne. Adu the hapchale yenga dabne haibne ba samhayo. Adu gi tholak bane basdagi. No illegal ne haine accusation toroga victimized sona banoina moi tanthokna bohona banena ne ureis. Now supposing if I position the eviction in case Sonzang village instead of this frame, if I use masi akoi ki revenue department ka forest ka department ka da official khana mathong manam chadaba dagi forest ki area the revenue pisalamba dak chitha pisalamba khopagi government na chief secretary na circularly chief secretary na Taurga chairman oiraga committee ma sema kanda revenue department ka forest department ki ani sigi chamam na base kong na ba confusion between forest department and the revenue department in order to resolve that thing other committee sema kanda survey taura kanda chumthok na bahona rakpagi part amani na chalur kanda di nasai ki Sonzang village ki evictions it acquires a very different meaning kamai na page sineba. This is what the importance of framing is. What they have said clearly in 107 is that the eviction of K. Sonzang village must be understood in the context of the allegation of illegal migration. Karigumba, if we choose to look at this event called the eviction process in K. Sonzang village, under a broader confusion between the forest department and revenue department, because some of the protected forests and reserve forests are dark chitapisan, and I know the revenue department says because of some corrupt official have done something, so they are trying to clarify it's not specific to K. Sonzang village. It was carried out throughout the state of Manipur, especially Akoijam Nasaigi reserve forest lerga beligi karigi leiba saruk se am tawebas. Now, if you read this event in Sonzang village under this framework, then you begin to realize that Kukis are not the only ones who got evicted. Maitais also got evicted, which is a huge number. I think Kukis, in the government circular report, it says only 59 of them. I just must be having the data here. Say, out of 413 encroachers evicted, 59 encroachers were Kuki communities. Maitais 143, Pangals 137, Nagas were 38, and Nepalis were 36. So, Kuki, the victimization of Kuki narrative would have not acquired that meaning if you change the context of reading K. Sonzang village eviction. But is it factual or is it infactual? Sonzang village, the eviction, is it a fact or is it a fiction? It's a fact. But that fact don't stand on its own. If you read it as they demanded that it must be read within this allegation of illegal migration, that particular Sonzang event, K. Sonzang village eviction, will acquire a particular meaning. But if you look within the larger effort to, negotiate and correct some of this confusion that existed between two government departments called Forest Department and Revenue Department, then K. Sonzang village eviction acquires a very different meaning. But what did this author do? They chose this one. So they are implicated in the reality they produce. The reality doesn't exist out there, outside of their frame. So, eviction, is it eviction a fact or fiction? Factually incorrect, or they tell us if it is factually incorrect? So that's what I said is a trap. It's a fact that eviction happened there. But the kind of meaning that it acquires in this report would be different if you choose a different dimension to analyze this. That's how this report is. Now, strange as it seems, Amada Sumukari Haigeda, Sigi Port Mayam se Moina analyzed over the deposition, testimonies of the people, newspaper report, documents by the tribal organizations, my people. Sigi I get research campus in a staple to the paying to talk Salamani Torres. Aduna moina parang turing tok sila misda adida maning dia hoge mamang dia hoge pose PSM tungan hap le I know the haiser is kaino moina ka hageda we base these narrations moina hani evidence kai de loge where do they collect this narrative to build up this sourcing the kai de loge da moi have it includes government circulars and orders. Sonzang village ki incidents in of the government, they said that they rely on government circulars and orders. But I have some of these circulars issued by the government of Manipur, both a clarification on the Sonzang incident or otherwise. Nasagi talk about government, all the orders and others, you don't find this in this report. Why? You said that you will be relying on the orders, which is in the public domain. On that incident, they don't choose. Sige talking about circular, just get clarification from the Forest Department. Even this was, I was told in a newspaper, you see ministers clarifying this. In government orders and circular, these official documents, they don't mention. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative they want to tell. Aduna niyang jage ko. Factually incorrect, if it is factually incorrect, tell us. They haven't told us. It's a trap. Sonjang incident happened. You said it happened, so I can't say it is false. It happens, but the meaning that it acquires is because of a particular framing that you have done. And so much so that despite saying in your own report that you will be using documents and orders and circulars of the government for its clarifications, why? Isn't it bias? Pick and choose. You're doing that. Now, magi ngasai victim of the tribal guys, let me turn to the choice of the word mayamse. You will see right from the beginning when it kicks off. Ay nangarang later the moini is they don't understand. There is something called primacy effect and the recency effect. It's a well-known psychological finding. People tend to remember what was presented at the beginning and at the end. In between, you tend to forget. Human tendency is that you tend to remember what was presented to you at the beginning or at the end. The same thing happens in lecture. Aduna ne koina public speaking ai thi oza su oiraga sigi training the management so di tak pasalamin ai at the beginning of my career. 90s early 90s haropada management the tak pasalamin. Sige si kamay na koina help tong ni mingon the memory se phan ge hai ta ri wa ngang ma koina sign post pi bai na taw koigi khabar ge article if the so koina heading pi the marakta ma heading ma sam hapsal is it becomes something like a new beginning and attention just singkhat na bo honori ne. There's a technique. Akoina 1 hour speech pirak pa matam da so now let me turn to this one kind high is that you are kicking off a new beginning so the attention of the people is drawn. Sige primacy and recency effect of the text. Mamang the reports iri said that's what people will remember more, not what you write in between. So that is why I cannot take your executive summary as an innocuous, Abre's version of the report, because that is where your motive is also reflected. Because you know that when you write that executive summary, that's what most people will remember. In that, the kind of word they use, the way you have explained the phenomenon, is what is problematic. That's why executive summary is an important part. Don't say that, jo constitution mein article number 1 se shuru hua hai, usse karo. I want the like pau hai se phajana pau gai na manungda. I mukhoy the pigi to ding asai primacy and recency effect to the lokhat pani manung the suning asai pira isin ngana manung example mai amning asai pikala isin moi ki kam sathi ke the arrogance na hari isin oza oiraga lahir chahi kunthra na takla ba mapam da leira ba ai ngon da natun na mi mit khui gai ba gi tai phira noin tawrai sai ba phau ba noin kari khang doi no ga na patronizing oi ba man ba ma it was we request you to read in detail. I am reading and giving you examples from within. But you must also know your motive is reflected in your executive summary. Because you kicked off, you set off. This is like the right-wing WhatsApp University does. They will say something wrong about it on WhatsApp, spread the news. The moment you try to correct it, the research have shown it. 10,000 number videos the correction 25% hana yang oi bang information pai ge so misinformation continues, disinformation continues. Ningsang we say ai na su na wai vote ki mamang da su hai give example ni. When Amit Shah was giggling in one of his leaked video during the election, they have this disinformation campaign that Mulayam Singh Yadav ka masa pa kupang thanai vote kat nan manak naksala kanuda. How did you know Samajwadi ki machim now if Mulayam Yadav and Akhilesh Yadav slapping? Then I said, Magi Walker Singh confidence mang doine. Santu edo BJP na. It's spread out. Adu ki leak video ni it's still available on YouTube. Adu kay daw rage to what happened? Jo karna tha, jo kaam jo karna tha, wo to kar diya na hai na. Ako'y na phang daw ba result to di phang, ako'y na pamjaba pot to di phang red na nga out na chena na mayam si confidence mahang give to di ako'y tawlo to di hari din. Even if it's wrong. So that is what, even if I made wrong, then what they're going to say that we are part of this game of narrative setting up. That's why Kuki are supporting us. That's why Maitais are against us. I am saying this. This is what the attitude is. If you do that. Aduna, executive summary, the thariba potuga, both the executive, I'll give you one or two examples of how that setting is not only in the executive summary of the report, but it is also inside the text. I just read out ngasagi akoigi executive summary, the first 2-3 paragraphs, so you can see. You see terms like ngasagi, what you say is konalaki manga sai violence kamai horaki is such sumira koda used or I am seeing the over. Tribunal presents overwhelming evidence of targeted killings, destruction of homes and places of worship, sexual violence and forced displacement and blah blah. It describes the emergence of ethnic enclaves, mass looting of weapons of police armories. These are seemingly facts. These are facts. But what, how and wherefore, the sequence that you have presented. See, they used the provocative state action, ST declared, is it choice of word? The moment you said that the decision of this High Court was provocative, is it provocative to the Meiteis? Is the decision of the High Court on ST, does it come as a provocation to Meiteis? Please tell me. It is no. So the moment you have defined the judgment as provocative, you're already positioning yourself on one side. This I learned as a basic when I started my research work. You use the term secessionism. When I interview people, many of them said, why are you calling us secessionists? We are a national liberator. We're a freedom fighter. The moment you use secessionist movement, that means you're taking a particular position. You're looking from a particular dimension. So the words are not very neutral. So provocative actions. Instead of saying, like there's a hardcore that leads to a, tension between the two communities, then you are objectively saying something, right? But the moment you keep on using this qualifying word, there are ample examples if you do that. These are sometimes we forget that these meanings doesn't make much sense. But you are already revealing your position. As I've given you example, when a feminist says something like this, who says that cooking is sole work of the women? It can be done by the men also. But my husband is very good. He helps me in kitchen work. The term helps. You're reproducing the old belief that this is the work of the women. So when you choose a word, you produces an inherent meaning. See, the way the language is used, the sequence, there is the manner. So if you're looking for factually incorrect, again you will miss. See the choice of the word, how this report has done. And I said that is why one group in this crisis is happy with this report and another group is not happy. And they think that they are non-partisan. Now look at this. I'll give you framing I'm coming to choice of word. How the words are used. Inside the text, they write determining violence. Kadai de kamai haurakhi aba violence aikoi kaino tauba matamda masi thigatpa matamda ne yang wai cinema na report sinai se kwen sinungai kidreda ani se samnar ha ko da tongan hap le me. Anyway, I'll just read it. The way this papers is organized by my people is all messed up. Page number 3 anyways. Semana have it. Inside the text, how and where the violence began, which group instigated it has been an extremely contentious question. It has been difficult for any non-partisan report and even experts who testify to the tribunal to ascertain the accurate chain of events. How and where and who instigated, this is a very difficult and contentious thing to say. This is what they write inside the text, page number 161. And what they do in their executive summary, which is something that people will remember. What did he say? He said, mob rampage through Kuki settlements in Imphal and nearby areas. In Churachandpur and Kangpokpi, retaliatory violence emerged against Meitei homes and properties. This is an executive summary. Anybody who reads the text, which is likely to be remembered portion as this. And you have said something like it is a very difficult, contentious thing to say. Who instigated, where and how it started is very difficult to say and so and so. But you make a categorical statement. I'm repeating, categorical imperative sentence. And they said this is an extraction of the text. How did you come to this conclusion? And present it in your executive. And you brush it aside. This is not a general statement. This is an extraction. Are you playing with game? Who's fooling whom? Extraction from what? And you think that we don't know that what is recency effect and what is primacy effect? And if this is not a conclusion that your report has done it, why did you conclude it in your summary? Chain of event way. Then the other word, this is not easy. If you are trained social science, then you will understand that critical discourse analysis, how to read the text and how the reality is shaped. Look at this line. Another thing that was said inside the text as well as in the executive summary. I'll give you another example. Kukizo communities were driven out of the valley. Compare this with other expressions. Meitei communities left tribal-dominated areas. Driven out versus left. What is the difference? Driven out is somebody have forced them. And they left. Meitei left the hill. And the Kukis were driven out. This is exactly in the earlier studies on the media. We found that, this guy was killed. And 3 Meitei died in firing. Who killed? Then, this attack, there was a report that we have analyzed it. So, Kukizo communities were driven out and Meiteis were not driven out. They simply left the tribal areas. Is this neutrality? You are already constituting what is the reality. And Sinamuk, inside the text, the repercussion is really nice. This is in the executive summary, and this is from inside the text, the chapters which they asked me to read. What they say? Look at this. The Imphal Valley and its surrounding district is close to entry of Kukizo community. It's closed. They were driven out. They're closed. This is inside the text. And what happened? And come to Meitei said, road passing through the hill areas are bare to the Meitei community. Lambi sa payadi haibo kaktani Meitei di. Meitei di lambi. Meitei is bare from traveling on the road. Whereas in the Imphal Valley and surrounding district, those guys were stopped. They were closed the door. Does it open up that we can, okay, highway to nahi ja sakta. We can't go on highway. But can we go back to More and settle down there or in Churachandpur and anywhere? That's how the word is being played out. Left, driven out, close, and we cannot travel on highways. It's not only about traveling in highways. Highways are, Kukis also the same thing. They can travel on highways which passes to Meitei areas. This is the same portion of the highways Meiteis cannot go, which is under the Kuki areas. So they've said, these districts are close to entry of Kukizo community and road passing through the hill areas bare to the Meitei community. And there are interesting examples like this. Valley district became Meitei stronghold, patrolled by armed youth groups. The other expression, hill district became Kukizo stronghold. Samani. Meitei stronghold, Kuki stronghold. But the difference is the qualifier, what comes in. It says, inaccessible to Meitei police and politicians. Are they trying to hide that this is equally inaccessible to the civilian Meiteis who have been displaced and languishing in relief camps. It's not only the police and the politician. What are they playing with us? Are they neutral? Look at this word. Hill district became Kuki-Zo stronghold, inaccessible to Meitei police and politician. Does it mean that the civilians is accessible to those areas? Similarly, Valley district became Meitei stronghold, patrolled by armed youth. Why don't you say Valley district became Meitei stronghold, inaccessible to Kuki policemen and politicians? This armed man is one of the key drop of the narrative throughout this debate. Let me remind them, I have no love or respect for the wrongs done by the government, both in Delhi and Imphal. At the same time, any XYZ armed groups, be that in the valley or the hill, for me, I know whose role and what, but I will not pick and choose to blame one and the other's silence. In my assessment, I have raised the issue to them. What is the role of the Sioux in this problem? Just as you talk about these armed groups in the valley areas, there's a frequency analysis. I'm not going to it. This is part of textual analysis. You can do how many words have been used and in what context, which qualifying word are used, and how the meaning is shaped. That I'm not going into the detail of the textual analysis. That's for a different engagement. I'm just giving you glimpses on when you learn to do this. So, remember that we left and only politicians and policemen are inaccessible. Of course, I didn't get access to the Phagaukchoi Kai Makhale Kai Bazaar, which is also called Kangbai Bazaar. I'm a politician, so it's okay. But I'm saying that why here you turn it, and in the other one you talk about armed groups. If I frame, Hill district became Kuki-Zo strongholds with ISIS type of marksmen and armed men parading all the time in the city areas. If I say that, what happens then? These are the narrative one. I was expecting some people who are not part of the conflict here to give an objective assessment and see where things are going. Instead, they have put fire to the problem again. Now people started exchanging in for or against this report, and they're enjoying. A report which should have avoided that one, if you have the sensitivity, without display of words, the way you frame things, if you have an objective, they should be ashamed that in a crisis which smacks of a conflict between two communities, one community appreciates you, other don't. This is a problem that they should realize. And I'm giving you why these differential responses are coming in. Now, the other part that they have mentioned, this is, I think I have more or less covered, except for the worst contentious issue that they have. This is also a very interesting part, because they continuously produce like this. You read this report and you will see, I'm just trying to give you to, especially the research scholars and my colleagues, when we read the text and why we should be responding, what is this text position is. I wanted to give you about what the issue that I've raised with them as my fourth point. First of all, you must realize one thing. In this narrative, though they said they didn't conflate, that particular epilogue, they are saying that you are picking up, they reproduce the entire paragraph. What they don't realize that I was reading that paragraph as the part of that chapter and how you have framed for the cookies, you write. Then for the Meitei side, that is where I was reading, where the introduction of a paragraph line and elaboration ends, and another idea was immediately introduced within that. There's a textual analysis. They are making a mistake on that. Betrayal. Betrayal of what? The promises are not kept. What promises are you talking about? Betray is what? When you have a contract, an understanding. That is where the word betrayal is used. So what is implicitly you are insinuating? Now the last point, I raised about the use of photographs, and I told you that there is a dead bodies. And what is strange, these are very well-known scholars and judges. The Global South scholars have been worried about the manner in which the dead bodies of Asian Africans are used in Western literatures and media. During the coronavirus, dead bodies floating on the river and lying down here and there in Africa and India was shown. But when the white men died, or in the European people died, they respect the dead bodies. They don't show those pictures. And recently in this another civil war-like situation in Africa, the same thing happened. And there's a heated actions between journalists from Africa, research scholar from Africa, countering New York Times. Similarly, during the coronavirus date, lot of Indian scholars were pointing fingers at European literatures. Why did you show those images? You're not showing to our dead bodies. This is nothing but racist Orientalism. You treat the other body differently. You have a double standard. You have a different way of dealing with your own body. Can you check how many times they have done this during the Delhi riots or Gujarat? It's worth reflecting. And when the Westerners do to Indian case, you protest calling them as Orientalism and racism. And the same thing happened with us. You don't say anything. What is the response? They said, well, it is in the public domain, and some of them will use it because the family permission they gave us. I wonder whether those research scholars trained in the best of the institute in this country and abroad, from my fellow Kuki community scholars, do they agree with this kind of a display of bodies? Or is it so twisted a political motive that showing those grotesque picture is a vindication of one's own narrative? And it will generate hatred and dislike for those who committed that crime. Is it a move to reduce peace and normalcy, or inciting to sustain the hatred and anger? Do you think that those images is going to give a good feeling? And you think that by publishing those photographs, you are going to bring normalcy and peace? I must remind them this. When I was making my film, Langoi Chalabi, in 2003, some of the images that have landed up on my desk in the editing table. One was a young boy who was shot dead, blood oozing out from his head side, dark, thick blood on a stretcher in a morgue. And another lady who was brutally raped by 2 Union's armed forces personnel in front of her disabled child. And it seems that after the rape incident, these 2 sepoys went away. I think these 2 were convicted later on, these 2 army personnel. When that picture, when the neighbor comes, and then perhaps those journalists who went there, they have a video recording of her mouth frothing. She was shaken up in this frothing mouth and screaming, and that picture came up on my editing table. I was working on this film, Langoi Chalabi, is about how Manipur and the tragedy of the armed conflict and how this violence and human rights abuses have happened. But I said, no. My team members said, Tamo, let's use it. This is what they have done, let's use it. I said, no, I can't make that. I can't make that woman's pain a spectacle in my film. If I saw this boys, what will be his implication? He's a dead boy. He's lying in silence and peace. Let him be. That's why UN protocol, Geneva Conventions, even legal parameters, human body is treated very sacredly. Habeas corpus in Article 32. If you look at the theory and political philosophy, you will know that the body is a very sacred object. in law, in war protocol. We have seen in this crisis abuse of those ethos. I have constantly reminded, we come from a community who had written a text called China Roll. There's an ethical war. We must protect our Ipanat, Ipunat. This is much before Geneva Convention. That same etiquettes respecting the dead bodies. Now they're saying that they get the permission from this one. It is in the public domain. I'm asking, no, it's your ethical responsibility to think whether to publish or not publish. The fact that you have published that to 17 in number without any other picture. I said, thankfully you have excluded Meitei victims' picture. I thank you for this because you respect the departed soul from my community. But still, those people who died are part of my society. Even if they are not part of my society, these are human beings. That is the ethics. Now, if you have failed yourself by saying that I choose, because the permission will get, this is in public domain, will you produce it? It is absolutely unethical one. And next time, then those Indian scholars and scholars from the South who have argued about how the dead bodies have been printed, they must condemn this aspect and this lame excuse. This is exactly the way I wrote in the letter also. The same thing New York Times reported, and how many of the scholars and journalists criticize these people. And they said, that's what I said, it looks like bullshitting. To kya kar loge? We have published it. What is your intention by publishing those things? Or those who want them to be published? Selling bodies, dead or alive, to serve a cause, to strengthen a particular narrative. Is that what you are trying? This is how we are victims. This is how we've been slaughtered. I can understand that motive if you are part of this crisis. But if you are a conscientious ex-jurist, professors, I expect them to think thousands of times before printing those things for two reasons. For not only this ethical question, but also the fact that this will fuel emotion. It will sustain those emotions. One of the things that I'm worried about our present conflict, unlike 1990s of the crisis in the hills, many of these brutal images are captured because of the smartphone. So the memory is not going to be here alone. It is going to be fossilized in these electronic gadgets. And when they popped up, there is a special challenge that we will be facing it. Memories is going to be reinvented again and again and again and again. That society has become different because of the invention of this internet and smartphone. We all know in social sciences, the society is not the only society. We don't live only in physical society, but we also exist in our virtual world, which influence our behavior and thinking. And one is thinking about how to deal with these images. You blatantly publish it, and you explain it away, the ethical implication as well as how it contributes to this conflict, by saying that this is already in the public domain. What is this argument? An intimate moment shared between two lovers. Once they broke up, this particular man has uploaded that image and the girl commits suicide. Will you reproduce that video again saying that this is in the public domain? Will you? Even when the parents of that dead girl gives you this video, will you still publish it? That's the question. That is what I said, racist Orientalism. Not only that ethical question, it has a direct implication for the violence. You want people's emotion to run high. You want people to fight over your report. That's what this report is to me. There are a lot of factually incorrect ones in between as well. I've given you one example. In fact, two. There are others, but the greatest tragedy of report is the manner in which this information is framed and presented. And once I have shared with you this, with you is because Unfortunately, how we respond to this, then what I wanted to share with you is this. The thing that I started off, this is part of the information war that we have been facing, is part of the conflict. You have series of these information war, distorted campaigning, making one community as victim and another as, all this word that used in this report, majoritarian and this government, that government. And one of the areas where they have failed, look at this. Government of India's response is called ineffective or ineffective response. If you have listened to me throughout this last 2 years, I said it's not ineffective response. I have said in two ways. Their inaction itself is an action that aggravates this. And I said they are complicit in this problem. But they have reduced the government of India's role as inadequate, ineffective response. Oh, they did respond. Government of India is benevolent. They respond, but ineffective. I said their refusals to contain this violence for 2 years, despite having so many security forces. They are talking about accountability of security forces. They generously use Assam Rifles deposition. This is the last part which I have written to them. There is testimonies and deposition. How do you use them? And your choice of deposition is what creates a different reality. These depositions, or whether it is factually incorrect, it's not important. They will say that is what the Assam Rifle officers say. That is what the Meitei victims say. This is what the Kuki victims say. We have nothing to, we have just kept what their testimony says. They're trying to bluff themselves. So I will give two examples for them as well as for all of us. I'll give you one from the partition studies. The women committing suicide because they are afraid the other community will dishonor them and the community's honor will go. And some asking their father to cut off their head and so on. That narrative, well-known feminist Urvashi Bhutalia once dealt with us. And she said, should I keep these testimonies independent of any intervention? Then she said, no, I can't do this. Because that will lead to a particular perspective. You position it, it will acquire a different meaning. So what they think that the patriarchal framework, you eulogize those women. You said, look at the courage to save our honor. And then these feminist scholars said, what makes you think that your community's honor is in my vagina? This is what the feminists started asking it. Why I should eulogize those little girl who says, Father, kill me before they rape me. This is a peculiar way of defining female sexuality under patriarchy. And I will be supporting that oppressive ideology if I eulogize these people committing suicide. That's a peculiar feminist take. So said, I will not leave these testimonies independent of my interpretation. I will say that this experience, I'll interpret it this way, under this frame of feminism. I'll be upfront about it. So you can't, when you're dealing with this kind of a crisis, by saying that we have given these testimonies. There is another issue. How many numbers of testimonies are used, in which sequence, and how you organize them is another matter. This takes me to the second aspect. Satyajit Ray, the well-known filmmaker, once he wrote a beautiful small piece called On the Question of Reality. He said, what is the relationship between feature fiction film and a documentary? He said, some people define documentary is based on reality. And he said, I don't like this distinction between fiction films and documentary on the basis of reality. Because he says, the reality of the drunken man or the wife beater that we saw in the feature films are also found in reality. So what do you mean by reality? And he says, the documentary filmmaker will be pick and choose this frame and then they will organize in a particular sequence. We know this act of organizing these different shots will create different meanings. It's just something that we are familiar in cinema. So imagine a film imagine a picture, a child playing on the grass, and there's the second shot is a snake on the grass, and third there is a man with a terrifying looking man coming and looking down like this with a knife. These are three different shots. You change the sequence, you create different meanings. Child was playing, the snake is shown, then this man comes with a knife, then you think that this man is going to save this kid from the snake. Instead, if you saw the child, the man, and the snake will all likely become a symbolism of the man who's going to kill the child. So in the manner in which you organize your materials, create. This is also well known in historiography. The narrative truth. In history, we said reality is when the historians link these events and put the perspective, then the very act of narrativizing itself produces that historical truth. This is well known, arguments by Head and White. So in that sense, saying that, we have testimonies and then deposition, the manner in which you are presented and freely used. The example is, this is my last comment in the chapter on media. Easy Eye, they generously quoted Easy Eye, which was already been contested, including in this book that we have done. Do they care to look at it? No. Kyo? I'm coming to what the chair has said at the beginning. Before I wind it up, when they said that they've just given the testimonies, these are real facts, but the manner in which we lined them up, the choice of those images. Say, in documentary filmmaking, I'll give you another example, how it's the same reality that happened. If I choose a different picture, the meaning comes differently. Think about protesting students who are blocking the traffic. Police beating them up, and you said protesting students beaten up by the police. Now, in the same sequence, you see one ambulance got stuck there and one is struggling on life and death within that one. If you include that picture, then you will begin to sense an insensitivity at the problem of that protest. In that film, you don't incorporate every picture. Reality is captured through that frame. So which picture you decide to incorporate, which not, this report even includes people who have been part of this disinformation game, who have been spewing venoms against one community called Meiteis, who doesn't even live in India. What makes them to choose him and his testimony to be presented in the report? What is your motive? You talk that this hate speech has been going on social media. A man who has been doing this, who are not even part of this country, this state, who doesn't even stay in these countries, his testimony is incorporated. And as I told you, Easy Eye report, you quoted it extensively, and one line, you remember that what I said, inverse pyramid. 1-2 sentences said, there's a furious response from Amju and editor Manipur groups. And then what did they do? They don't reproduce that text inside as a counter to what I have quoted from Easy Eye. Easy Eye, what they do, they push by saying that there was a furious response from the Amju and so forth, and they said the link is given below. It's in the footnote. When you already know that this report has been contested and there are problems which is any sensible person would have seen, you don't want to see that because you are determined to paint one community wrong. That's why they said even that in Assam Rifle officers telling Meitei media. If I started calling Indian Express and Times of India as Mayang media, will you accept it? Do they know that the Sangai Express and others were reporting with reports being filed by Cookies and others, their correspondents from Kangpokpi and Churachandpur? The behavior of the local media changed, of course. They went against the ethical standard because they were sucking into the conflict later on. But the initial part, you look at the report, and many of these practitioners are not Meiteis, but you dare to call it a Meitei, and you think it's an unproblematic expression, you use it. Whether they have Pangals as a staff member, correspondent, you don't care. So much so that's a factual incorrect because they wanted to develop the idea of majority versus minority. So they report the census report of 53% Meiteis. What they don't realize is that this 53 includes Pangals. Meitei is less than 50%. That 53 is based on the mother tongue assessment. Don't they have this even basic? The literatures are already there. So 53 Meitei is majority because it fits the bill. They wanted to call it majority versus minority. Do the Pangals have problem in getting access to More and Churachandpur? Please tell me. Are they part of this conflict in that sense? They travel to these places. They are not part of the conflict. But that 53 includes them. This is a factual mistake. Terrible mistake. The moment you know that this 53 is not Meitei and Pangals are there as a part of that 53%, then you can't frame it as a majority minority. Because Pangals are not part of this conflict in that sense. They or in More. Do these professors and jury members know about this? Because you wanted to say majority, minority, Meitei 53%. It is this, I'm ending it, what the chair said is part of my assessment. That's what I said, Meitei Hindu, majority, Christian minority. That's the template, that's the frame where every time you wanted to say people don't want to listen. That's what the chair said. And there's the category, if any faculty member from philosophy is here. This is called testimonial injustice and hermeneutical injustice. What are these two? That's the problem we need to understand. That's a challenge. What is testimonial injustice? This is a concept given by a philosopher called Miranda Fricker. What he says is, what is testimonial? You are a Meitei, so I don't want to believe you. This is called testimonial injustice. It's a well-known work in philosophy. And what is hermeneutical injustice? It is like in the interpretive repertoire or scheme of things, there is a lack of concept to represent your experience. Akoigi experience represent the way another concept because of the larger structural system. Say, for example, hermeneutical injustice. Akoigi marital rape. It's a difficult concept because in a marital relationship, sexual relationship between the husband getting access to the sex of the woman and the woman getting access to the man's sex, is a contract, is part of it. So usme kahan se aage rape ka concept? That's the idea. So your experience of having forced to have sex by your husband, even though you don't want, you don't have that consent, that's the marital concept, marital rape. Because of the patriarchal notion of sexuality and the idea of marriage, we don't have a vocabulary to capture. So in psychotherapy, feminist psychotherapy, we often say we must provide a home to that experience by coining a home called marital rape. Hermeneutical justice is when your experience cannot be captured because there is no critical concept to capture it. Because of the structural meaning system. We suffer because they brand you as majority. Therefore, how can majority be victim, bhaiya, when you fight with minority? You understand this one? So you suffer from testimonial injustice because you don't believe, because you are Meitei, because you are a majority. How can you be a victim? So this is the manner in which we suffer from when you respond to this one. It's an entrenched idea. And in fact, these authors of this report could very well be a victim of this inability to free themselves. I'm giving this as a benefit of doubt. Many of the Manipuri started saying that they must have been financed by the cookies, by the narco-terrorists. They can be easily bought. I will not go that far. Because they fail themselves. As intellectuals, as people who have been for decades fighting for justice and human rights, because the ideological blind spots and then refusal to reflect on these works is what they are still trying to justify the report. And as I said, unfortunately, the end product is, this is end up painting one community, as I have already explained, example from the way they use the word, the way they choose their frame, the way they organize the interpretive repertoire for this work, the manner in which this text is organized, the primacy effect and the recency effect in between, how they present these testimonies. I have given from series of examples about feminist testimony, how they think about it in partition work and so on. These are the things that I've learned, and what disturbs me is whatever I'm speaking to you today, they are familiar with it. So the big question is, why they do this? That question is for us to investigate, and it is for them to answer. Thank you.